It's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
You tuned into ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. This is ZiFM Sport on a Throwback Thursday. And for the past 2 weeks, we've featured two of the best female tennis players of all time. And today we feature one of the greats who is in fact still on the circuit. To profile this iconic player, the team in studio, Barry Menandi, Mike Madoda, our producer is Sean Tafirenyika, and my name is Chris Nidzi.
Hi, this is Benjamin Locke. I'm on the Zimbabwe Davis Cup team, and you're listening to ZiFM Sport.
Arguably the greatest player of all time, Serena Williams, she has rewritten the record books in a way that no other tennis player, man or woman, has ever done before. She's achieved everything there is to achieve in the sport and is still going strong even at the ripe old age of 39. Barry, you take a look at her overall impact on the sport. No one has made the same impact as Serena Williams.
No, absolutely. And I think we talk about those sports stars who transcend their area of interest. So, you talk about your Jordans in basketball, Tiger in golf. You look at Serena in tennis. She has transcended her sport. She has managed to make the game almost a byword, albeit that's the centerpiece of her life. It's almost as if Serena is this cult hero, urban legend, because of the things that she's achieved on a tennis court. And I think that because of that, Serena will always possibly be named as the greatest of all time when it comes to women's tennis.
Greatest of all time when it comes to women's tennis, and in some conversations she's even considered one of the greatest athletes of all time globally. Mike, you take a look at those years in the 1980s where she's finally got a racket in her hand. Her and her sister Venus are being almost drilled into becoming these tennis champions. Critical to their success was their father, who even moved them across the US in order for them to be able to thrive in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. The investment of her dad, Richard Williams, as well as the mother, popularly known as Brandy, they were pivotal to the success that we have seen from Serena Williams and her sister Venus. And the fact that the father coached them through those initial years. The father invested in them in an environment which was not welcoming to young black players, and coming from Compton, a very rough part of Los Angeles. They were able to beat the odds and become the global superstars that they are now. So credit to their talent, but also credit to the belief and the investment and the mental fortitude that came from her dad and her mother.
And I think that upbringing also comes through even in the way that the girls played, Serena and Venus. You could see the fight in them. You could see that they were playing a little bit more than just tennis. They were literally playing for their lives, in inverted commas. And I'm not trying to over dramatize it and make it seem like, listen, they were coming from rural Africa or anything of that nature. But what I'm saying is that they were fighting to stake a claim in a sport that was not welcoming of them, of people like them. And so as a result, I think that even turned them even more into cult heroes.
And, we talked about last week, Steffi Graf starting off at the age of 4. Serena Williams, it was just 6 months after that, 4.5 years old when Serena Williams started this game. And just the sheer amount of tournaments that she was able to play in before she even turned 10. I think she had played 49 tournaments before she turned 10, and she had won 47 of them as a young tennis player. So this just wasn't about having a dream and wanting to see your daughter play tennis. No, it was about driving her into a global athlete and putting in the hours. You know, people talk about the 10,000 hours. Serena Williams had probably doubled up on that before she had even become a teenager.
She'd probably doubled up on those 10,000 hours, well on her way to becoming one of the greatest of all time. But there was a lot of resistance that they faced going into the sport, obviously from the gender dynamic, but also as black athletes. Let's hear from Serena Williams, who talked about the resistance she faced bursting onto the scene and how negatively she was perceived.
But I think in the beginning of this journey, I was definitely misunderstood. You never saw anything like me and Venus in my field of work in tennis, you know, so we may have said some things that people just couldn't relate to, and they just probably thought we were talking about something different, or took it the wrong way, or made a negative connotation out of it, when it's not like that at all. We're just trying to be us and trying to be, you know, the best that we could be. I definitely was scrutinized because I was confident. You know, I was black and I was confident. And I am black and I am confident, you know. But I would say that I feel like I can be number one. Oh, no, you don't say that. Yeah. Well, why shouldn't I say that? Yeah. You know, why, if I don't think I'm gonna be the best, why do I play? I could be hanging out, I could be at the beach somewhere, or doing something different, you know. And if I playing the number one player and I was like, oh yeah, I think I can be the best, I think I can be better than her, you know, they're like, oh, she's so rude, or she's so disrespectful. And I never meant anything or said anything in disrespect. My dad always taught me, if you want to do something, you write it down, you believe it, you study it, and then you believe that it's going to happen. So I believed that I was going to be number one. I believe that I could have been better than who was number one at that point. Right. You don't really see that when I started a lot in a black tennis player, because we didn't play a lot of tennis, and we weren't supposed to have that confidence because black people didn't do that great before. We did some great things in tennis with Arthur Ashe and Althea Gibson, but it wasn't that one player that was winning, like I said, multiple Grand Slams. It became a problem. We literally took the globe and shook it, me and Venus.
That negative perception and staking her claim in the sport apparently being something that turned heads. But obviously, if you take a look at the way she was performing, her style of play, these were claims that she was making that were not necessarily unfounded. She was an incredible tennis player, and all she needed to do, Barry, was to then furnish these accolades and kind of quieten the naysayers.
Absolutely, and naysayers there were plenty, and Mike and I and you spoke about the fact that there was a lot of resistance of her and Venus bursting onto the scene, and so it was almost paramount. She almost put pressure on herself by stating that she wanted to be the best, because number one, it put attention on her, but it also put an X on right across her forehead, whereby she was targeted and so had to make the performances. The thing that I think assisted her the greatest is her style of play, which has a huge amount of power, the power game being the centerpiece of it, lots of baseline strokes, the ability to move her opponent across the court, because she can, with equal almost accuracy and power, play the forehand and the backhand, and then also in limited moments use the volley game as well. So an all-rounded player, and that power game, again going back to her fighting spirit, then assisted to almost drill her opponents into the court.
Mike, Barry talks about her strength there, but is there anything that we can point to? And let's talk about peak Serena Williams, not Serena Williams now, but when she was at her absolute peak, was there anything you could point at in terms of weaknesses in her overall game?
There were not many. There were not many because she used to blast her opponents off the court and didn't give us enough time or give her opponents enough time to exploit or to show any chinks in her armor. And a big part of that was her big serve. She's widely considered the best server in the history of the women's game. She regularly reached double figures in her ace count during a match, which is something of a rarity in the women's game. You know, in the women's game, if someone is aced 3 or 4 times, that's a high count. Serena Williams would be acing her opponents 12, 14, 16, 18 times, sometimes even breaching the 20 ace mark. That's how powerful she was. So her game didn't allow her opponents enough time on the court. You know, her points, especially when she was serving, were always very short. And like you said, we're talking about peak Serena here. Her points on her service game were very short because she was just way too powerful for her opponents. There was a time actually when people wanted to set up a challenge. Can she match up to the men on tour? There was talk around that. But obviously, just in terms of the men would be a bit more powerful, etc. You just compare, for example, the service mileage on the aces, etc. Big difference between what the likes of Mark Philippoussis and what she was serving. But the fact that that conversation was even had was testament to how good she was and how dominant she was on the women's circuit.
You're so right, Mike. And I think, look, if people just think that you can grind people into your opponents into submission, and that's enough for you to win tournaments and begin to win lots of Grand Slams. Just look at Emily Mauresmo. She was touted as being a very big hitter, power player, but she didn't achieve half of what Serena achieved. So Serena was able to balance the power with the finesse of then being able, especially when the rallies, Mike says that she played fairly short rallies, but if there was a return that made her think and she was playing a thinking player, she was then able to outthink her opponent and deliver the result.
Definitely deliver the result. And speaking of peak Serena, let's take a look at her relationship with her sister Venus. They obviously played together, but to some extent, Mike, there was a lot of competition between these two, and you can say to some extent they helped to sharpen each other.
Yeah, Venus actually emerged as perhaps the more promising player. That's the player that people tipped to say she's the one who looks like she's going to have the big career. And she would have had a career as big as Serena Williams, obviously, if she hadn't suffered from that debilitating illness, which meant that when Venus Williams hit her peak, she wasn't able to compete physically, or she wasn't in good enough health to actually compete at the very top of the women's game. But Serena Williams won her first Grand Slam before Venus. A big part of it was that Serena Williams was built very differently from Venus Williams. Venus Williams actually had the quintessential white build. She was tall, she was slender, and she wasn't hauling any carriage whatsoever, unlike Serena Williams. Serena Williams, it's well documented that I'm her biggest fan, and she was built like a house, and she is built like a house. She's actually lost weight recently in the last 12 months. But when she was peak Serena, she was built like a house, which meant that she had a lot of power, and that's what she used, especially in her matchups versus Venus, to overcome her sister. So once she got the hang of Venus's ground strokes, once she got her movement going, she always overpowered Venus Williams. And you've got to feel sorry for Venus Williams, because I think she's got about 7 or 8 defeats in Grand Slam finals at the hands of Serena Williams. So that 23 Grand Slams that belongs to Serena Williams could quite easily be 15. And the 7 or so Grand Slams that Venus has won could quite easily be 16 or 17. It could have been a more balanced career for both of them. But it was a fantastic rivalry, especially at the time when Venus Williams had not yet fallen ill. They were definitely, without doubt, the 2 best players in the women's game.
The 2 best players in the women's game, and they will certainly go down in history. In 2002, when the Williams sisters ruled the women's tour, Venus actually gave some insight on what it was like playing her sister.
Well, it sure is a difference, because I know Serena and I always want the best for her. Maybe I'm in a different position than what Serena's in, because I've always been the older sister and I always took care of her and gave her my lunch money or whatever it counted, the jacket, whatever it took. So I think I'm in a different position, whereas, I'm still looking out for when I'm on the court, but I'm still trying to get the win. Mm-hmm. So it's like this, it's different now because I've got to win the titles too, because it goes in your permanent record. Yeah. So, but it's just, it is definitely a strange situation to be in because no one else has been in the position that Serena and I are in. And I think, all in all, the best part is that right now we're the best at what we do.
Z.
Barry, very interesting there coming from Venus Williams about their relationship and how on court was on court, but as soon as they got off the court, they were back to just being sisters and everything is normal. And she actually had an interesting conversation with the New York Times, that's Venus, talking about after the win, what happens. And she had something interesting to say.
She really did, because she said that Serena hates to lose, and her reputation is she never loses to anyone twice. And I think that typifies the character of Serena Williams and the reason why she got as far as she did, the reason why she's got 23 Grand Slams. I forget which football coach said it and said it best. They said that, yes, you've got to love winning, but you've got to hate losing more. So you'd never want to feel the feeling of losing. And it sounds like from Venus that Serena hated the feeling of losing. And if you don't want to lose, you ultimately have to win. And Serena's certainly a winner.
She's certainly a winner. And there's another rivalry that's talked about quite a lot in the media. It's been given a lot of airtime. And that's with Maria Sharapova, Mike. Is this a rivalry we can even talk about when it comes to Serena Williams, or did the media kind of conjure this for the newspapers?
I would like to just call it the rivalry that never was, because it only existed in the first year that they got to play each other. And you go back to 2004, I think it was, Maria Sharapova actually defeated Serena Williams in the final of the Wimbledon tournament. Maria Sharapova winning her first Grand Slam, and then the year after, Maria Sharapova would be ranked world #1. So it was during that 2004-2005 era that Maria Sharapova probably played her best tennis. And what the global media was looking for was someone who would be able to compete with Serena Williams and the Williams sisters at the top of the game. So she was and I hate to say this, she was the bright white hope that could be the force that could counter these two black girls that had come out of nowhere to dominate women's tennis. But it was downhill thereafter, because Serena Williams pummeled Sharapova game after game, tournament after tournament, match after match. Their record is a sorry one, because 22 games played and Maria Sharapova has only won 2 games to Serena Williams 20. That can't be a rivalry.
It definitely can't be a rivalry. And let's take a look at Serena Williams' numbers. So most Grand Slams in the Open era, she's got 23 of those Grand Slams. Most aces in a single tournament, that was Wimbledon 2012. She got 102 aces. Most consecutive weeks ranked #1. And this is a record that she shared with Steffi Graf, and that was 186 weeks. But Barry, the most important metric usually when it comes to judging who is the GOAT is that most Grand Slams stat, and that's 23. And in the modern era, Serena Williams is considered, and rightfully so, the greatest of all time.
Absolutely. The only danger is that I think that what we've been talking about throughout this coverage of Serena Williams, and that is that the establishment, the institution, doesn't necessarily like people of color going to the top of the charts, as it were. I know it's a little bit controversial, but you look at it, and that's why Margaret Court is still touted as being the greatest in inverted commas, because she's got 1 more Grand Slam than Serena Williams. So there is a resistance in that regard, but you quite rightly point out in the modern era, with the changing of the game, with what Margaret Court played versus what Serena Williams played and is playing, are 2 very different sports in inverted commas, because the modern game is a lot more taxing and Serena has gone along. So for me, greatest of all time.
And you don't have to be apologetic, Barry, over your sentiments or over the establishment, because we see it even in other sporting codes. Tiger Woods versus Jack Nicklaus.
Yeah.
Listen, everyone who's got half a brain knows that Tiger Woods is a far better golfer than Jack Nicklaus was. Sure. You see it in cricket as well. There is a reluctance to talk about Sir Viv Richards. And Sir Viv Richards is better than anything that anyone anywhere else has ever thrown up. And yes, the establishment will go and talk about Sir Don Bradman, who played 100 years ago. That's how desperate they are to make sure that Sir Viv doesn't get that accolade. So this is a recurring theme around different sporting codes.
A recurring theme around different sporting codes, but I think most people in this era can agree that Serena Williams can definitely be considered the greatest of all time. So she, in 27, tied the knot, had her daughter Alexis Ohanian, and she also started making incredible investments in football. For example, they're part owners in Angel City in LA. She's got her clothing line going. She's managed to make all these investments as a philanthropist, as a humanitarian, as a businesswoman. But the most important question, guys, can she get that 24th, or is it time to focus on other aspects?
Well, she last won her last Grand Slam in 2017. We're talking about 4 years ago here. That's my concern. She's now 39 years old. She's got to a few finals, yes, in that process. She's got to a few semi-finals. So it means that she's on the cusp of doing it. And as long as she gets close, as long as she's getting to semi-finals and to finals, she'll always have hope that she can get number 24. And that's what's keeping her going. The only reason why Serena Williams is still playing tennis is that she wants number 24. Can she do it? I don't know, but I certainly hope she can.
We certainly hope that she'll be able to get that 24th. She's made across her career $94 million in winnings alone, which is double any other female tennis player has made, and possibly more than 90% of the men as well. Serena Williams, the greatest of all time.
Hi, my name is Rudoni Shamba, Maitoria's super striker. You're listening to ZiFM Sport.
Let's go out with our play of the day. It's Throwback Thursday, and it's Beyonce with her track Sorry. Now, Beyonce and Serena are friends, and Serena made an appearance in Sorry, which is arguably the most powerful song on Beyonce's 2016 album Lemonade. We'll be back tomorrow for a preview of your weekend. May God richly bless you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Manande, out.